to 1975 every single time because, as I mentioned, for the sake of Philadelphia International Records, Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, and that whole crew, very transitional year, marked with controversy, marked with defections, marked with drama, and a bunch of foolishness. But one thing that was remarkably consistent was that the OJs was going to put out some really, really good music. Everybody, welcome to day 27. That's right. We are 3 days away from the finish line here with the Black Music Month 30 series here on the Groove Line. My name is Chris Stevens. I'm the host of this particular program. Hopefully you all are doing well out there. It's Friday. It's Philly Friday. And as you can tell, I've gone back to 1975 every single time because, as I mentioned, for the sake of Philadelphia International Records, Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, and that whole crew, very transitional year, marked with controversy, marked with defections, marked with drama, and a bunch of foolishness. But one thing that was remarkably consistent was that the OJs was going to put out some really, really good music. And 1975 was no exception. They were another artist and group that put out 2 albums on Philadelphia International. I already talked about the MFSB 1975 records. I've talked about Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes 1975. So we're going to cap it off with who you could possibly argue, and I'll pose that question in a little bit, Philly International's strongest sort of moneymaker, and that would be the OJs. And we'll start with Survival, which came out in April of 1975. As you can see, a very garish album cover. I don't know if that's a tree. You know, I mean, I can, you can see the face because, I mean, you see eyeballs, you see nose, and you see lips, and you see, you know, a baby up the nose. You see some other things going on within that bit of cover art, and it's just very, I mean, it's not pretty to look at. But that's pretty much how America was for Black people in 1975. So that's really no surprise that once again Philly International comes through with the political statement. So the record starts off with the biggest hit from the record, Give the People What They Want. And of course that has that same Anthony Jackson sort of rubbery, echoey bass line. It almost sounds like For the Love of Money, but it's not The Love of Money. But we talked, the OJs on the previous album, Ship Ahoy, talked about For the Love of Money, how people will do anything for money. And now with Give the People What They Want, we get to the root of the cause, which is the people want better education, the people want better food to eat, the people want better housing, and the people want money, money. Shouts out to Eddie Levert, who just had a birthday, matter of fact. So this is right on time. But yeah, it starts off with, you know, Give the People What They Want. And then, of course, there's a song that's written by Bunny Siegler and Alan Felder that went on to be one of Eddie Levert's greatest concert showstoppers. I mean, Just Let Me Make Love to You. It's funny because I've talked about this before, that Gerald Levert, shortly before he died, was doing an interview and talked about how his dad was so frustrated that Rick James had caught on to how Eddie was singing. And it was so funny because Rick, Gerald said whenever he would run into Rick would just start singing, just let me make love to you. And it's funny because if you listen to Rick James ballads, matter of fact, prime example, when we talk about what Gerald was saying about Rick, you know, taking a little bit of Eddie's swag, listen to Don't Give Up on Love from Rick James Garden, the Love album, and tell me that man ain't doing a near perfect imitation of Eddie Levert. I promise you. Especially when it gets to the choruses, the pre-choruses and all of that. I'm telling you, Rick was absolutely inspired by Eddie Levert. But yes, back to Survival. I mean, Just Let Me Make Love to You. I mean, it speaks for itself. This is a man that is begging for the opportunity to share in sweet romantic bliss with a woman. And again, this was written by Bunny Siegler, another Philly International secret weapon that got tired of being a secret weapon, and Alan Felder, a Philadelphia musician who went on to produce others good music for other people like Keep Rising to the Top by Kenny Burke. And, you know, these were the people that were hanging around the studio at the time, and they were writing songs and submitting them to Kenny and Leon, and they just sort of fell into the middle of that. And Survival, the title track, I mean, it speaks for itself. I mean, the OJs are talking about the survival of the fittest. We got to get out here and get it because, you know, it's no good being a man being broke. I mean, that was what they were saying in 1975, and in 2025, the rules still apply. So, I mean, most of the stuff on this record was written by Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, including Where Did We Go Wrong, which is a breakup song. Well, actually, Bunny Sigler and Ron Tyson. Yes, Ron Tyson, that is part of Otis Williams' Temptations right now, was a songwriter back in the day. He also wrote "What Am I Waiting For" with Bunny Sigler. That's another breakup song. And The Rich Get Richer, pretty much the same thing as For the Love of Money, and How Time Flies is a song about how, when we were kids at one point in time, but now we are grown adults and life is just, flying by. So it's very hard. And Never Break Us Up, it closes the album. And of course, that was written solely by Leon. And it's just a great song about, how the OJs and their women are going to stick together for eternity. And Survival was an album that did very well on the charts, even though it's not, people don't remember it the same way they remember most other OJ's albums for one reason or another. I mean, it's hard because when you think about what Survival is in between, it's in between Ship Ahoy, which is one of the great concept records of all time. I'll never forget one of my mass comm professors at Delaware State, Baruti Capano, Dr. Capano. He talked to us about Ship Ahoy and how that was one of the most important records of the day, probably of all time, if you listen to it front to back. And I had to go listen to it front to back after he said that. And it was like, this tracks. And then, of course, you have the album that we're going to talk about on the other side of this. But Survival was actually a really good record. It just didn't give the same hits that, Ship Ahoy did. Because Ship Ahoy has probably the best OJ's love song of all time about that good thing. Whoa, baby, I guess you've got your hooks in me. And Eddie talking about, I'm caught like a fish, y'all. And then, of course, there is For the Love of Money. And Now That We Found Love and all the other OJ's great stuff. So, I mean, that was what Survival followed. But what followed Survival was probably might have even been the bigger hit and might even be the OJ's most complete album, in my personal opinion. And that, of course, is Family Reunion. Now, that came out November of 1975. The Wikipedia has it listed as November 25th. So I don't know if that's the official date or not. But think about this. The OJs came out with the album on November 25th, 1975. And Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes came out with the album Wake Up Everybody on November 26th, 1975. So imagine being a young person, you get your allowance, you go to the record store, and you're probably going to have to pick between either the new OJ's record or the new Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes record. That had to be tough. I mean, we're spoiled today. We don't talk about enough about how spoiled we are with the fact that we could just pull up something on our phones or on our laptops or whatever and listen to it, and then go and listen to the next album that comes out that's out that same day. I mean, you literally had to make a decision. When you got to, Tower Records or Sam Goody or whatever your local record store was at the time. I mean, and this was before cassettes too. So, I mean, this was still when people had albums, when people were tucking, those 12 inches under their arms, walking out the store or having them or putting them in paper bags or whatever, and just being very careful walking down the store, because if you fall and trip and that vinyl cracks, that's it. All right. So I'm going to pose a question to you guys, and you can answer this whenever you get the chance. But I really want to know what you guys think. Who had the better 1975? Is it Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes with To Be True and Wake Up Everybody? Or is it the OJs with Survival and Family Reunion? Would really love to know what y'all think. But getting on to Family Reunion now, and this is an album cover that I absolutely love, because you see Eddie Levert, Walter Williams, and the late William Powell in, sort of triangle form in the middle. And then you've got all these different people from walks of life. You see what I believe is a Jewish person in the back with the beard and the yarmulke. I mean, you see a Muslim, I think a Hindu or Indian woman on the to the left of Walter, a black woman with a baby to the right of Eddie, and a young white girl with a Raggedy Ann doll to the left of Will Powell, and an Asian girl deep in the corner. And this is what Kenny Gamble was talking about, with respect to racial harmony and black uplift and all of that, is that, we are a family. And the title track definitely speaks to that. But it actually starts off with unity. I mean, the first two songs on this album are absolutely in that Kenny Gamble vein of, social justice, social uplift, black doing upward mobility and all of that stuff. And talking about we've got to have unity, and of course the title track, family reunion, gonna have a family reunion. And Eddie has this spoken part at the end where he's talking about, it's like they're at a picnic or a barbecue, and he's like, the father, he he isn't domineering, but leading with love and direction. And your daughter, sooner or later, she's gonna be a mother. It's funny how he said that, and she'll have her own sons and daughters. Like it's probably one of the OJ's top 15 or 20 tracks, and in my opinion, and when you need a title track to really convey the message of what your album is supposed to be about, then I think Family Reunion absolutely fits the bill. Now we get to You and Me. Now this is a song that escaped me quite a few times listening to this album in my youth, but as an adult, it just, I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready to call it a top OJ's ballad, but it definitely ain't near the bottom. And this one, it was written, of course, by Bunny Sigler and Louise Bishop. And I mean, just the way that the song sounds, like just the way it starts off with that heavy drum kick, and then it just sort of slows down to a pace where Eddie is trying to convince this woman that, yeah, I know you've had your heart broken many times before, but I ain't that dude. I want to make this work with you. We can build a brand new life together because I've been hurt as well. You and me, we can make it last. Like, just, I get them. I mean, honestly, it makes you emotional listening to that song if you have any sort of heart, because it's like, yeah, I mean, we've all been through stuff, but let's try to get through it together. And then, of course, closing out side one is She's Only a Woman, which was written by John Whitehead, Gene McFadden, and Victor Carr Starfin. They didn't get to work with the OJs very much, I saw, checking through the liner notes and different things. But this one, She's Only a Woman, yeah, this is another one of those, records that is about, uplifting a woman, even though women don't like to be, especially Black women, don't like to be defined by the work that they do or the emotional burden that they carry. But it's, I mean, it's meant to be, I would say it's meant to be, complimentary, but I can understand how women would find this record patronizing in the 21st century sense, because a lot of women today just don't feel like doing the suffering that their moms, grandmoms, aunts, cousins, and great grandmothers did back in the day, which is fair. But I think She's Only a Woman is probably one of the best written songs for the OJs. And again, it's meant to be complimentary. It's probably complimentary in the 1975 space, but probably not so much in 2025. And then side two is where everything just really picks up. I mean, side one isn't bad, of course. I mean, but side two feels like, one of the best representations of the OJs, the best 3-song run any group could have in 1975, 76. Of course, there's Living for the Weekend, because Living for the Weekend is fun because it starts off with this really slow, sort of bluesy, benediction vibe. And Walter's talking about, I'm tired. I'm gonna go across town, pick up my lady. We gonna hit the town. You might see me on the east side or the west side, or I'm going across the bridge because I hear they really get down over there. Wow, wow, wow. Now I'm really curious because I'm trying to think if this is from a New York perspective, or would the main character in the story be going from New York to like somewhere in Atlantic City or North Jersey, or would this person be going from Philly over to the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill? Because there was a casino and there was a club in New Jersey called the the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And my mom told me about the Latin Casino. She said that was the first place she saw Harold Melvin in the Blue Notes with Teddy, and I can't tell that story. I can't tell that story in full, but the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, that was a happening place to be. So maybe that's what Walter was talking about. Of course, this was written by Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, and the same dude who helped them write Me and Mrs. Jones for Billy Paul, Kerry Gilbert. And of course, it starts off with that real slow sort of, you get the sense that this dude is getting off of work. He's tired. He's coming in the house. He kicks off his shoes, and then he says, "All right," and then, I'm gonna freshen up, go get my girl, and we are going to go party. And then when the party music picks up, and here comes Eddie. From Monday to Thursday, I'm dead on my feet. Most of the time, too tired to eat. When I read the paper, I fall fast asleep. But soon as Friday comes around, dun, 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 I'll lay all my weekly burdens down. Dun, 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 put on my glad rags and paint the town. Living for the weekend. Like, it makes me do the Victor Cruz salsa. If you remember the New York Giants wide receiver Victor Cruz, who used to do the little salsa dance after every touchdown, that's what living for the weekend makes me do. So, it's, and then it goes back to that real slow time when it's like, all right, we done partied Friday and Saturday, and now it's Sunday again, and we got to get on back to the JOB on Monday. So that's a really fun record. And then, of course, you have, probably the one that people probably consider the best OJ's ballad, Stairway to Heaven. Not to be confused with Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, by the way. The Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven, which I've never heard, I really can't tell you about, but the Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff version of Stairway to Heaven, that's about sex, good people. It is absolutely about hot, lovely relations. Yes. So, I mean, we're going to, here we go, still in a moment of pleasure. Here we go. We're going to find the pirate's treasure. That's an orgasm. Climbing the stairway to heaven. Because what is an orgasm considered? Heaven. And we're going to go it step by step together. It's about sex. I can't make it any plainer than that. Again, songwriters back in the day were very, very crafty with the way they talked about sex. I mean, when you think about Voyage to Atlantis by the Isley Brothers, that ain't nothing about the good gusher. That's all that's about. But yeah, Stairway to Heaven is absolutely describing sex. If you're just figuring that out, welcome to the club. But if you already know, you know. And then of course Family Reunion closes out with another dance floor jam. I Love Music, another one of those songs that makes me do the Victor Cruz salsa. And it's the perfect song. I love music. Any kind of music, long as it's swinging, all the joy that it's bringing. It went to number one December of 75, went all the way over into 76, and it's another smash for the OJs. And just looking at these two albums from the space of where Philly International was at the time, again, you saw what I was talking about earlier with MFSB, splitting ranks. You talk about how Teddy Pendergrass was tired of, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, and he ended up leaving. The OJs were the only ones who just kind of sort of stayed the course within Philadelphia International's doors at that time. Like, I mean, of course, Will Powell was dealing with, health issues, and he would eventually die of cancer a couple of years later. But Eddie and Walter were just steady as it went. I mean, steady Eddie and Walter, they just kept the beat going. And that was huge for Philly International when you talk about, they were this close to losing Teddy Pendergrass because Teddy had quit the Blue Notes and was probably going to sign with another label until Kenny and Leon literally just backed up the truck for him. Then, of course, you have the main guns in the studio band saying, y'all ain't paying us enough. We out. I mean, 75, again, was a really, really tough year for Philadelphia International after all the success they had, with Love Train, The Love I Lost, If You Don't Know Me By Now, The Sound of Philadelphia, Love Is the Message, all of that. I mean, it literally was just 75 was the year that split Philly International in two for good. Like, they soldiered on through the rest of the 70s, but by the time 1980 came around, that was a dead label walking. And it shouldn't have been that way. I mean, Kenny and Leon could have been a little more fair with the profits. They could have leaned on McFadden, Whitehead, and Carl Starfin a lot more. Same for when Dexter Wanzel came on board in 76. Like, I imagine it's hard running a record label. I imagine it was hard running a record label as a black man in 1975. But you got to sort of start thinking about your future. And Philly International's future was very much a fractured deal after 1975. And it's unfortunate, but the music still lives on from those early days. And I'm not saying the second half of the decade wasn't good to Philly International, because that would be a lie. Again, the OJs kept on trucking. Teddy Pendergrass became a megastar. The 3 Degrees started, coming up with bops. They got Gene Carn on board. And Gene Carn, of course, became, a legend in her own right. So I'm not saying the second half of the 70s for Philly International was bad, but it wasn't as good as it could have been, especially not with the way 72 to the first half of 1975 went. Like, it just wasn't the same label after that. And that's why I felt like it was important to talk about 1975 and Philly International from the space of, because it's been 50 years, and people always wonder, like, yo, Philly International had all the bops. What happened? Greed is what happened. Jealousy is what happened. Mistrust is what happened. Lack of focus is what happened. And it was unfortunate because there were so many good groups and bands and artists and songwriters that, you know, hung around Sigma Sound and Philadelphia International, that Philly International should still be going to this day. Didn't work out like that. It's very unfortunate, but, you know, again, if you came up in that era, I envy you greatly, because that music was great. And, you know, I listened to it as a millennial and think, wow, these people really must have had a good time. And people did have a good time until the time stopped being good. And that's going to do it for day 27 here on the Groove Line of the Black Music Month 30 series. Greatly appreciate y'all for watching and listening as always. Contact information will be in the description below. Don't forget to like and comment on these videos, because we have good conversations in the comments. And the more likes and comments we get, the more eyes and ears can be on the channel. Almost poked myself in the eye. Damn. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you can be notified of all the new content that drops on this channel. So thank you for riding with me on the Groove Line. And until the next time we ride, y'all be good, or be good at it.